Welcome to the Rainy Day Rabbit Holes podcast, your escape from the mundane.
Dive into the rich history of the Pacific Northwest with us and let your mind wander down the rabbit hole.
Because in the Northwest, it's always raining something weird. I am Shea.
And I'm Jody.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole. Hey there, fellow rabbit hole divers. That sounds weird.
Yeah, I had rabbit holers. Hole divers might be a whole. I don't know. I think that's an OnlyFans section. Hole divers. I love hole divers.
Oh God, dive.
Oh,
everyone just turned this off. Shea here, and have I got a treat for you this week on the Rainy Day Rabbit Holes podcast. So remember how I'm always telling you about the weird and wonderful places our curiosity takes us? Well, recently, it led me straight into the lair of some of America's most elusive creatures, cryptids. That's right. I had the absolute pleasure of being a guest on the Rev's Geek Out podcast with my buddy Justin. And let me tell you, it was a wild ride through the forests, swamps, and mountains of cryptid country. So picture this. Rev and I huddled around our mics. That makes it sound like we were huddled together.
Yeah.
We were actually just facing each other. Swapping stories about Mothman, Sasquatch. Yeah, that's a thing. Sasquatch.
What does that look like?
Guess
you got to listen to the episode.
You got to listen to the episode, yeah. And of course, the granddaddy of all cryptids, our big daddy, Sasquatch himself. So we dove deep into the origins of the Sasquatch mythos right here in our beloved Pacific Northwest. And trust me, the story behind some of these tales are actually some of the hoaxes are almost as entertaining as the cryptid tales themselves.
I agree.
Oh, and did I mention Batsquatch?
No, just Sheepsquatch.
There's Sheepsquatch, there's Batsquatch. Because apparently that's a creature someone thought up too, and I can't decide if it's ridiculous.
Does it have to be a mammal? Can it be an orca-squatch?
Somebody create that, please.
It's the C version.
So I can't decide if it's ridiculous or ridiculously awesome. So I think maybe both.
Both, I agree.
Now I have to come clean. I may have gotten a little carried away with my skeptic's hat on. In fact, I ended up apologizing for potentially ruining cryptids for some of the Rev's listeners.
Shea ruins everything.
What can I say? Debunking is my superpower, even when I'm not trying.
Accidentally.
But don't worry, we had plenty of laughs along the way. So speaking of the Rev, can we talk about what an amazing host he is?
Yes.
We just had him in the studio for 4 hours.
gracious guest to be here with us that long.
Exactly. And you will be able to hear those episodes in the upcoming weeks. Well, before I wrap this up and we get to the episode, I've got to give a shout out to the Rev's Geek Out podcast. If you're into all things geekdom, and let's face it, who isn't? You need to check out their Patreon. He's got weekly episodes covering everything from cryptids to comics, movies to mythology. And trust me, it's worth every penny because you can get it for free. Or you could also pay him if you want.
There's options.
We all like it if you pay him. We all like to be paid. So grab your Bigfoot calls and your skeptic's monocle because this week we're taking a detour into the world of cryptids. Whether you're a true believer or a diehard skeptic, I promise you'll find something to love in this episode. Stay curious, stay geeky, and remember, in the world of Rainy Day Rabbit Holes, sometimes the best discoveries are the ones that may or may not exist. See you down the rabbit hole.
Shea, thank you so much for coming on Rev's Geek Out. I really do appreciate this.
Of course. Well, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for asking me on. Now, I thought you were bringing me on to talk about Star Trek because that's my big geek out, but we'll save that for a later date.
We may do that as a bonus episode. I feel like if we just geek out on the nostalgia, because a couple of weeks ago was the first episode, and I leaned into the Y2K aesthetic.
Yep, I loved that.
And geek fashion, but it was also getting into the nostalgia and all those comfort things. And I just loved our text messages as we were talking about and planning this show, because it kept going back to the geek nostalgia aspects. And I love the Star Trek. I love the fact that you got in with Red Dwarf.
Yeah, MST3K.
Yes. All the good things, all the good, I feel like Gen X nerd comedy.
Yes.
Was really came out of like the 90s and with all of those things that are still going on today.
Yeah, and they still have a pretty big fan base.
But we did I did bring you on today because I wanted to talk creepy cryptids. Because when I had you on, and if you guys go back to the Grit City podcast episode, search for Grit City podcast, Rainy Day Rabbit Holes, and you can talk and get the interview with you and Jody as we all talked about all of that. But I wanted to congratulate you because a couple of weeks ago, you had your 1-year anniversary for Rainy Day Rabbit Holes.
I know. We made it through 1 whole year. We did not quit.
That's a boon. That's like, there's a lot of people who will do a podcast for 3 to 10 episodes.
Yep. And they're like, oh, this is so much work. What did I get myself into?
Yeah.
Which I had those moments, believe me.
Probably still do.
Oh, yes. Every couple of weeks, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have spent every second of my free time working on this stupid podcast. Why am I still doing this? It's real dumb. I'm not changing any lives.
But you are. You're bringing a lot of history of the Pacific Northwest, also in terms of actual history, the deep dives. I love your deep dives into Tacoma, especially
Those are my favorites.
The organized crime just the shenanigans that happened in this city that I live in. So it's been really great to see how you go about with all of that. But then you also get into the spooky stuff too. And yes. I enjoy every aspect of it. And with this 1-year anniversary, you can bring people up to speed because you posted the original episode, so to speak.
So what we did is, because I went back and listened to our very first episode, which was our very first time recording ever. And we were in a hotel room in North Bend, Oregon, in the Itty Bitty Inn, which is this amazing little roadside motel, which is famous because they have an enterprise room. And it is fully... Hey, I brought it back around to Star Trek.
Star Trek, yeah. I'm like, this isn't the rent-a-car.
It's a fully decorated, like it's the bridge of the original Enterprise. And the innkeeper is a huge Star Trek fan and a huge Star Wars fan. So the entire inn is covered in murals of Star Trek and Star Wars.
Are you serious?
Now, he changes them enough so that he doesn't get, boinked by Disney because they're litigious, but so that's where we recorded our very first one. We had no idea what we were doing, and I've listened back to it and I'm like, God, this is boring. Why? And the thing is when people go to your podcast, there's some people that will just scroll and find the episodes that look interesting to them, or they start with the most recent one. But then there's those other people that are like, we're going back to the first one. And if your first one sucks, it's less likely that the second one that they're going to stick around for. So we're like, we're going to re-record it. We're going to talk about a little bit more of some of the ghost stories from some of the towns we hit on that road trip. That was the kind of inspiration for the podcast. And just kind of give it a little bit more of an introduction of ourselves and what the podcast was and what to expect over the next year. So we put that very first original episode now is in the vault, and you can only get it if you're a patron.
Nice. There we go. There we go.
So we replaced it with a new one we recorded. We talked about, which is also one that we released for our anniversary. So we talked about the Flavel House in Astoria, which is an old Victorian house that's haunted, supposedly. And then the Heceta Head Lighthouse, which is also supposedly haunted.
Oh, wow.
So we got a little ghosty.
So you got a little bit deeper. I loathe to go back to first episodes. I have on CD of all things.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I have one PC somewhere that actually takes a CD, but I have them of my originals from like 2008.
Oh, wow.
When I first started I am so afraid to go back and listen. I know I have some cool stuff in there, but I don't know if I want to listen to all of that.
Yeah, I'm always scared to go back and listen to like the first 6 months episode of our podcast because I'm like, oh God, the audio is going to be terrible. But it's not that bad. So I just listened to episode 6 recently, kind of in preparation for talking to you today, because we did do a Bigfoot episode.
Mm-hmm.
Episode number 6 was all about Ape Canyon. And I was like, well, Jody already did the research. I'm going to listen to our episode. And I found myself actually like loving the episode, although I was like, man, Shea, you really needed to learn how to use a limiter and some normalizing. So I was like, I can go back and
all the technical stuff.
I know, like I can go back and clean up the audio a little bit if I can find the file.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I was like, this was fun. So I was like, whew, phew. Wasn't too bad, but the first episode was rough. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I will definitely link that episode so everyone can get in on that and see and listen to that. And then I'll also link the Grit City podcast in the show notes as well, so you guys can get the ins and outs of all of that. And I brought you here to talk about creepy cryptids because of our previous talks about how much you know about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and all of those things. But I wanted to start this off in a whole other region. And that region is West Virginia.
Okay. All right. Where the meth is.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
And where maybe these are all just induced creatures that people have found. But I discovered this playing Fallout. Do you know of the Fallout games?
So I have the game. I haven't played it. I think we have Fallout 4 at home.
Okay. Yep.
My husband played it. I just don't have time for video games, but
Fair.
I will be playing it when I have my shoulder surgery because I was like, I can have my hand like this doing controller, right?
Yeah.
But I've watched the series and absolutely
It's fantastic.
loved it. Like I was so sad when it was over and I'm like dying for the next one, but that was so good. So well done. Chef's kiss. I hear Borderlands is terrible though, but
I've heard Borderlands is really, really, really bad.
because I love that game so much.
Me
I love
too.
post-apocalyptic stuff. So
Yes.
that's why I'm really drawn to those. And Borderlands is such a fun game.
Yes.
I have like
It's so
I have
good.
1 through 3 and playing it with somebody or playing it on your own. It's so fun. So I was like, oh, Borderlands the movie, yay. I hear it's bad. I'm sad.
Yeah, nobody likes it. It seems to have gotten the live action Avatar movie treatment, like Avatar The Last Bender, The Last Airbender.
Didn't see that one.
The live action is terrible. We watched it on like Freeview.
Okay.
And we were like, because we loved the cartoon, and it was, you can see some semblances of the actual thing,
Okay.
and that's along the same lines as Borderlands. Like, they're in a place that has the characters with the names, and they kind of look exactly like, well, not exactly. They kind of look like what they're supposed to be, but everything is just a little off.
Oh.
And that's really what Borderlands ends up being.
Oh.
Fallout, on the other hand, perfect. Like you said, chef's kiss.
No notes.
Yeah, no notes whatsoever. Walton Goggins is amazing as a
Isn't he?
person. He's
Incredible.
so good in so many things. So Fallout, that series takes place along the lines of like the first couple of games, which is on the West Coast. So you're looking at like Northern California, maybe Southern Oregon, Nevada, and those kind of regions.
Yeah.
Fallout 3 takes place in the capital wasteland, which is Washington, D.C. 4 takes place in the basically the Boston, the Massachusetts area.
Okay.
And then they came out a couple of years ago with Fallout 76. Canonically, it's the most recent from when the explosions go off. It's 25 years after the nuclear bombs go off.
Okay.
And it takes place at Vault 76 in West Virginia.
Okay.
And so they Bethesda really likes to lean into the lore of the area. So when you're playing like Fallout 4, you'll get some of like the Salem witches, and you'll get some of those aspects. With West Virginia, there is I want to say just like a glut. Like there are so many cryptids and creepies that go through there that they have now incorporated them into the game.
Oh, how cool.
And that's what got me pulled into these, because some of these I'm like, okay, I've heard of the Mothman.
Sure.
Which we'll get into. But I didn't know anything about the Grafton Monster. There are a couple of other ones that come up in the game, and I'm like, did they make them up? No, they pulled them. They pulled them from local lore.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to this. All right.
So they've made it into a this post-apocalyptic game is taking the lore and the supernatural aspects of it. And what I found was West Virginia University has their library, and they have a whole Halloween area, but they go into Appalachian monsters.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I loved it so much. So just straight from the website, which I will link as well, but it's libguides.wvu.edu/Halloween/monsters.
Remember that.
Yeah, good luck, everybody. But it says, the rolling hills and deep forests of Appalachia are home to a wide array of natural flora and fauna, and perhaps unsurprisingly, are also a hotbed of monster or cryptid sightings. While Appalachia refers to a large area that covers New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, we're going to focus on West Virginia. The page that they brought up here is going to cover the creatures of this region, but of course it's up to you to decide if you believe these stories or not. And they even started off with a public library. What West Virginia cryptid are you?
Oh, I love it.
So
Are we doing it?
Yeah, we're going to take it right now.
I love these quizzes.
So I'm going to start with you, Shea. Take the
Okay.
quiz. It's time to relax. How do you wind down at the end of the day? A nice cup of tea and a big sweater? I'm going to binge an entire season on Netflix. Finally, I get to relax with a good book. Partying is relaxing, or relax with all this work left to do? Which one most fits you?
I'm a little bit of a combination of these, so I'm going to have to decide. Let's say like my last hour of my day.
Yeah.
I've got a cup of tea and something on Netflix, but I'm not binging a whole season. So which one would that be?
Let's go with a cup of tea.
Yeah, let's go with a cup of tea. I have to have tea at night.
Yes, we do the warm drink. I'll usually go with emergency, heat it up with the electric kettle.
Oh, there you go.
And the wife will usually go with tea, or if she's working out, she'll go with like an electrolyte sort of drink.
Okay.
But it's that same thing. I need a warm drink to soothe me for the end of the day.
In the summer, I'm like, I don't care if it's 1,000,000 degrees outside. I have to have my hot tea. Okay.
What are you drinking? Coffee, probably iced, a margarita, whiskey, beer, or milk?
I bet you could guess this one.
See, with you, I want to lean towards beer, but I also want to say whiskey.
I'm a beer girl.
You are beer.
Yeah.
You are beer. Okay.
Beer will be my number one choice. Always. Yeah.
Always and forever.
I like a little whiskey now and then.
Okay.
But, beer is my love.
What's your favorite genre of book? Romance, science fiction, fantasy, young adult, or mystery? Now, guessing for you, I would think maybe science fiction or mystery just because of Rainy Day Rabbit Holes.
Yeah, and I grew up, I love science fiction, but I also love mystery. So I'm going to go with mystery.
Mystery.
Yeah.
Spook time. Where are you going to spook people at? A mine, livestock enclosure, back roads, on buildings at night, or in the creepy woods? So this is apparently if you were going to be the cryptid, where would you hang out?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little backstory about me. Well, not really backstory, but just a thing. So I'm now a tour guide for Pretty Gritty Tours, right?
Yeah.
And he wanted me to do some of the Tacoma ghost tours. And I was like all in because I was like, this is sweet. But then it just happened to be that one weird night at the end of August where it was like 50 degrees and pouring down rain when I was shadowing the tour.
Yeah.
So I'm outside, I'm cold, I'm wet, it's dark. And I'm like, maybe not. So I would say I'm going to be in an old building because I want to be dry.
Okay.
And inside.
There you go. That makes perfect sense. And yeah, I was with you at the stadium tour. You were one of the guides.
Yep.
As the wife and I and your co-host and a whole bunch of other people ended up going on the ghost tour, going up into the spooky attic and doing all the cool, crazy
And that's great because
stuff.
it's inside.
Yeah, and it's inside.
It's
Don't have to
very
worry
warm.
about
In
it.
fact, too warm during the summer. But I'm sure this winter it's going to be fantastic.
Next question on this list to find out which cryptid you are. You're getting hungry. What are you going to munch on, assuming people and sheep are unavailable, of course? We're looking at French fries, chips, charcuterie board, veggies, or cheese. Oh, I love cheese.
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 100% cheese.
Just cheese. I like how the charcuterie has basically everything, but they're just like, you just want cheese. It's your birthday. How are you going to celebrate? A big party? A small party? Bar hopping? No celebration. Birthday? More like birth week. I have an entire week of things planned.
I would say a small party.
Small party? Just me and my besties.
Yeah.
Which section of the Morgantown Public Library where this is all taking place? Morgantown is a place in West Virginia,
okay.
which I know because of Fallout. There's a whole area where you get to go to Morgantown in the Morgantown Airport in Fallout 76.
Okay, but not the library?
Not the library, but you get to go to the high school. So it's around that area. So which part of a library is your favorite? The reference desk, the circulation desk, the All Center, which is the history and potentially haunted houses, are my favorite. The stacks, I'm just here for books, or online. I think maybe online on this one, just because we're all online.
Well, I mean,
but what's your favorite spot in a library?
The full center?
It looks like all, AULL, and it says history and old, potentially haunted houses are my favorites.
Let's just go with that one because I like the history and haunted houses. That sounds great.
And then, which music are you listening to? BTS, Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, The Weeknd, or Keith Urban?
Why are these our choices?
Now, I know, I was about to say, as a Gen Xer, very close to my own birth date, I would have to say that probably none of the above.
I mean, look, I have one BTS song in my workout playlist, and then my husband is randomly a giant Swiftie.
Nice.
And so I am forced to listen to Taylor Swift constantly. So let's just say Taylor Swift, because that's what I'm being forced to listen to.
Taylor Swift
and Linkin Park. I'm like, I'd rather listen to the Taylor Swift, honestly. I'm not a Linkin Park fan, sorry.
Fair enough.
But when he puts on the Tool and the Alice in Chains and the Pearl Jam.
The 90s staples, yeah.
And then I'm AC/DC and the Cult and that sort of stuff. So that's where I am. But
nice.
Yeah, but let's go with Tay-Tay.
Let's go Tay-Tay for this one. If you were to leave West Virginia, well, fortunately we're not there, and go anywhere, where would you go? Transylvania, Ireland, Grand Canyon, Australia, or the Amazon rainforest?
100% Ireland.
Oh, nice.
It is on the list for next year.
For next year for you?
Yeah. We made a friend with, I made a friends with Newell's, who's the host of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries, which is a fantastic true crime podcast.
Such a good one.
So good. And so, I mean, we talk almost every day. I mean, we chat. But yeah, I'm going to go visit her next year.
That's amazing. That's going to be so cool.
I know. I'm excited.
That's one of our goals, is to go to Ireland eventually. And it's like do the castle tour and do all those ridiculous things. And then also the other one is go to New Zealand.
Yeah, I'd love to go
for
to
the
New
Hobbit
Zealand.
holes, essentially. But yeah. And which would you rather go as for Halloween? Witch, princess, Frankenstein's monster, Shrek, or a Viking?
I'll go as a witch because I actually already have the costume.
Nice. You are the Mothman.
All right. Awesome. I have some nice wings and spooky eyes.
Yeah. And we can get right into the Mothman, too, because that's the perfect lead into it. And straight from the West Virginia site, the library there says, no list of Appalachian cryptids would be complete without the most famous of them, Point Pleasant's own Mothman. On November 12th, 1966, a group of gravediggers in Clendenin claimed they saw a man-like figure flying low through the trees near a cemetery. On November 15th, two young couples reported to police that they spotted a large gray flying man with red eyes near the TNT area north of Point Pleasant. Over the next year and 1 month, numerous sightings of a similar creature called the Mothman were reported in and around Point Pleasant. Finally, on November 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge crossing the Ohio River in Point Pleasant suffered a sudden collapse, resulting in the death of 46 people. Following the collapse, there were no more reported Mothman sightings in the area, and speculation arose that the events were connected. author John Keel's 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, later made into the 2002 film starring Richard Gere, expanded this connection, claiming that the Mothman was a warning of the collapse. Local experts and authorities attribute the sightings to a large heron or crane, owls, or even pranks and hoaxes after the initial report made the news. Regardless, there is a statue of the Mothman in Point Pleasant in a yearly festival celebrating the creature and the town. And so, yeah, in the middle of this town is a giant metal sculpture of the Mothman who looks absolutely freaky.
I know. Is that like some six-pack abs there I see?
Yeah, he's got a full-on six-pack. It looks like he's wearing wrestling trunks, too, to be perfectly honest with me.
It does. And then does he have, like, duck feet? I'm kind of far away from that picture, but that's kind of what it looks like. He's got beautiful butterfly wings that are torn.
Yes.
Hold on, I'm going to lean in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just like, so you look at it, and he's got...
Is that chest hair?
That's the craziest part. Like, looking at this, I want to go take it really looks like either chest hair or moth on the moth.
But he's got some like very sculpted pecs.
Yeah.
And like a crazy six-pack.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of, and even like a Russian newspaper claims that there were Mothman sightings in Moscow that foreshadowed the 1999 apartment bombings. And so this is a whole precursor. The Mothman is a precursor to terrible events happening.
Okay.
And so if you see something along these lines, something terrible may be happening. And it seems to be along the lines of what you would see in terms of like buildings or like construction having like faulties or collapses, or again with bombings and stuff like that as well.
Interesting. You know what's interesting to me too is so in the Bigfoot research, a lot of those sightings happened in the 60s as well. So it's like what was going on in the national consciousness in the 1960s, because it's like the UFO thing started in the 1940s. I mean, there was the Maury Island incident, there was Roswell within like weeks of each other, and then from there on out, it was just like craziness in the late 40s and early 50s with the UFO, and then here we see these like interesting cryptid sightings in the 60s, and so you know, you have to look at like what was going on in the world and the country.
And it was like you said, in these decades we had the nuclear threat. Mm-hmm. And so the Cold War had just begun. So a lot of the unknown stuff, it was something where people would just rampantly speculate whether or not it would be some sort of creature, like you said, aliens. And aliens really seem to bring in the aspect of the unknown and terrifying, which leads to the next one, which is the only extraterrestrial creature on this list for West Virginia, which was the Flatwoods Monster.
Oh, never heard this.
And it's funny because, again, it's in Fallout. The Flatwoods Monster is in Fallout 76 as this little tiny alien dude who, if you see him, he's not too bad, but if you aggro him and make him attack you, he's really powerful. He'll shoot laser beams at you, and he might gack you pretty quick. So it was kind of terrifying whenever you see him. The only extraterrestrial creature on this list is the Flatwoods Monster, naturally sighted in the small town of Flatwoods, West Virginia. On September 12th, 1952, 3 children saw a bright object cross the sky and land near a farmer's field. Gathering their friends and families, they returned to the site, which they suspected to be a UFO crash, and encountered a strange red glowing light and a strong smell. One of the group shined a light and saw a man-like figure with a round red face surrounded by a pointed hood-like shape, while another member reported seeing a green outfit and claw-like hands. The group ran from the figure and contacted local authorities, who searched the area the next day and found nothing, although the local reporter claimed to have found evidence of a UFO landing. Unfortunately, investigators into the Flatwoods Monsters, both at the time and over the years, have thoroughly debunked its existence. That same night, a meteor was sighted across West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, accounting for the trail of light. Numerous red flashing aircraft beacons can be seen from the area of the sighting, and the creature itself was probably a common barn owl perched on a tree branch, which can be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, they're huge.
The evidence of a UFO landing was consistent with a truck leaking oil, also having investigated the meteor. Nevertheless, the Flatwood monster has persisted in local legend and popular culture. And I mean, that really kind of leads into a lot of the local myths that can be debunked, but also it's kind of just fun to believe. It's that X-Files I want to believe sort of aspect to it.
Right, exactly. Like, even though I'm a huge skeptic, I still love to get into these stories, and I love the myths and all that. And yeah, like, make me a believer.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if I'm going to believe in ghosts, a ghost needs to show up in front of me for me to believe in it. And same with like an alien or a Bigfoot. I need a body, or I do not want to encounter an alien. I don't know. That's the most terrifying to me. Did you watch? Because we're the same generation. Like, we're, I think, a month apart, right?
I think so, yeah.
What's your birthday?
May 4th.
And I'm April 5th.
Oh, wow, yeah. So, yeah, 100%.
So, as the older and wiser one in the room.
Fair. All right, yes.
By 29 days. Fire in the Sky.
Yeah.
Was like transformative for me because it was terrifying, and that's what made me terrified of aliens from now on. It
was for me it was actual like Alien and Aliens, because I watched those far too young. I'm of the, like, my whole family group was just like, you'll watch this movie and you'll be fine with it, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine with this. And then you're like, oh, nightmares and terrifying things later, they really get into you. Fire in the Sky was absolutely terrifying just for that. The singular scene that always comes to mind is when he's standing outside his truck, the light comes down, and he just seizes. And it's just, like, stuck in my brain, like, for all time.
For me, it's the square fingerprints on the window.
Oh.
Because now it's like you're home alone, or you watch a scary movie, and you haven't pulled all the blinds, and you look out, and you're like, your brain is like, am I going to see square fingerprints, or like that little figure, like just a silhouette, not a whole alien, just a silhouette in the doorway or something like that. And that's the thing that gets my brain and gets me going.
It reminds me of Signs, the movie, the M. Night Shyamalan. The only scary part of that movie was when the alien just walks across the shot, just like in the backyard. He just pokes his head out and walks by. Like, I don't know why that's the scariest part of that movie, but it was just seeing that and just imagining looking out my own screen door and then seeing something like that walk by, and then just absolute terror.
I mean, yeah, and what do you do? Like, I don't even know how I would react if that actually happened to me. Would I be trying to make up excuses about what it was and downplay it and say it was something else? Would I be paralyzed, or would I jump into action? I don't know.
We had because the way my house is built, I've got a whole bunch of windows facing out to the backyard, and I'll leave them open for the cats or whatever, just so they can get some fresh air, and we get some fresh air circulating through the house. One night, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, I'm going to close the windows, and the cats are right by the window, just kind of hanging out. So I'm like, oh, that's fine. As soon as I go to close it, I'm hearing this rustling outside.
Oh, no.
And we have a fenced-off backyard. There's no easy way to gain access to it. And I have cameras in the backyard as well. Like, I can see everything around my house. But I can't see anything because it's pitch black. And I can't look out there. And I just hear all this rustling and shuffling. And I just think someone's in my backyard. I'm hoping it's someone back there just trying to steal my tools, because then at that point I can just yell at them and hopefully we can be done with it. I'm also thinking aliens or like large wild animals. Turn on the light. Turns out it's a family of 5 raccoons playing in my backyard.
Oh,
very adorable.
I love a trash panda.
And they didn't cause too much chaos. But at the same point, I have that moment of, I don't know what's out there, but I need to find. So I had to like run to the other side of the house where the lights are for the backyard to turn them on. Because I'm not just going to go out there in the dark.
No.
There's no way in hell I'm doing that.
This is not actually a horror movie. You're not going to be the person in the horror movie.
Moving on from the aliens to a headless monster. And I love this one because even the West Virginia article has a screen grab from Fallout. So this is an actual screen grab from Fallout 76 of the Grafton monster. Not to be outdone by Flatwoods, the town of Grafton in Taylor County, West Virginia, has its own local monster, the appropriately named Grafton Monster. It was allegedly first sighted in 1964 by Grafton Sentinel reporter Robert Cockrell. In a possible conflict of interest, Cockrell published the story of his sighting, followed by numerous other articles and interviews detailing the other sightings that same summer. Cockrell's initial sighting and others not long after described the monster as a large, white or grayish bipedal creature with no visible head. Local authorities discredited the sightings, and there have been few since 1964.
60s.
Yeah.
Once again, we're back in the 60s.
And part of it also, I felt like it was one of those sort of tabloid news grab sort of aspects, too. Mm. Like, they really wanted to pull in some of these. And even on the site, they had there was a picture that I found through all of these that there's a lot of different creatures that they have alluded to in this area. So, like, even, I don't know if you remember it because it was one of those things from my youth. I guess my grandmother and grandfather, they would get a subscription to the Weekly World News. And one of the mainstays in the Weekly World News was always ridiculous stuff, like the incredible, like, melting woman, or again, a lot of
man gives birth.
Yeah, silly stuff like that. But one of them was Bat Boy.
Yes,
and Bat Boy originates from this area as well.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so if you ever see those pictures of Bat Boy, which are forever again seared into my brain,
I can see that too. And wasn't that in So I Married an Axe Murderer? Do you remember the scene with his mom? Because it was like, that's news. Man gives birth. And Bat Boy was on that.
Yes.
I think Bat Boy was on that one. Yeah. So that's forever in my mind. Also, a movie of our generation
yes.
for sure.
Which,
not the greatest movie, but it's dear to my heart.
Same here. The slam poetry scenes always get me. And yes. I love the exact, the whole thing. Very quotable. But if you're not from the 90s, you have no idea when someone I asked for a large, hello. Like, just little things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
also,
deep in there.
I think if you aren't from the 90s and you didn't watch it as a teenager, it's not going to hold up today. You're not going to watch it and enjoy it.
No, like, I've gone back in the last, probably decade now at this point and seen it, because quoting it was another thing that's bonded my wife and I together.
Yes.
We watched it, had a great time, but also it is so 90s and everything is really stuck there.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the humor of the 90s or the references,
or even just Mike Myers.
Yeah.
Like, that was his, like, heyday, man.
Yeah.
And he disappeared, other than doing, like, voiceovers and Shrek and stuff, like, for years. But he was, like, a beloved comic of our era.
Yeah. The SNL generation, SNL in the 90s, Wayne's World, a lot of those things, just so good on that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, for the last one that I wanted to talk about, because it leads into what you've been talking about, and I just said the name previously just to get you kind of a taste of it. Sheep Squatch. It's so hard to say.
Sheep Squatch.
Sheep Squatch is another thing in the game. It's a terrifying beast. You have to go through a whole quest line to discover the Sheep Squatch. And in the game, it turns out to be a mechanical creature, like a giant robot that was created that has gone kind of haywire.
Okay.
But it was made to look like the Sheep Squatch to terrorize everyone. Think of like a Scooby-Doo villain.
Yeah.
But instead of having like the mask pulled off and being the old man, it's just the robot, and the old man is just, at this point, long gone, and it's just running around.
Okay.
So, another cryptid with ties to Point Pleasant and the Charleston areas of West Virginia is the Sheep Squatch. Various sightings across the region in the mid-90s described this Sheep Squatch as a large, furry or woolly white creature, usually quadruped, although sometimes bipedal. Sightings report that the creature has a dog-like head, but with goat or ram-like horns and sharp teeth and claws. The Sheep Squatch's initial sightings state it ran from people, but it seems to have become more aggressive over time. Given the location of the sightings, there is speculation that it is from the TNT area, much like the Mothman. Perhaps related to the sheep squatch are the white things or devil dogs. These creatures are said to inhabit isolated wooded areas of Appalachia, and while usually have dog-like appearances, have been said to resemble bears as well. They always have long, shaggy white fur or hair, and are said to move quickly and aggressively towards other animals and people while making terrifying noises. Victims of these creatures state that their attacks feel real and painful, but they are left with no visible wounds or injuries, and the creatures themselves disappear. Sheep squatch is freaking terrifying.
Okay, so I'm going to put forth a theory
Mm-hmm.
that sheep squatch is just a really ugly ram.
Yeah.
And the people are just being rude, and he's mad about being so ugly.
Well, and that was in 94. I found another link to it about on cryptids.fandom.com about the sheep squatch. It says 94, a former Navy seaman said that he had witnessed the beast breaking through the forest. The white thing breached the brush line and knelt to drink from a creek. And the witness stated he observed the animal for a while before it moved into the bushes. And then the same year, 2 other children observed the creature while playing in their yard. I mean, it came across in the 90s and it started there, which is a direct, like, contradiction to all the other stuff we had. Maybe like in an X-Files sort of way.
Well, I was about to say, what was big in the 90s was the X-Files.
Yeah,
and I think it brought its own, phenomenon of people citing all of these things that maybe were seen on the X-Files. I think it's cultural phenomena. I mean, remember like the killer clown thing where they were like, oh, there's just killer clowns, but it turned out that it was really like 2 pranksters, and then everybody was just like, no, we've seen killer clowns. In fact, I think
it just blew up. Yeah,
an elected official even was like, there's the
Yes. Well, and that it leads into, again, the 90s was also the beginning of the internet for most people, and that was the easiest way to spread the word at that point.
Sure.
Like in the 60s and 50s, it was maybe radio, but a lot of it was newspaper and just word of mouth. With the 90s, you could just suddenly get everything out there to a whole audience. You could make your Angel Fire, your GeoCities site, and just be about, here's the sheep squatch, and we saw it, and you could post a couple of silly, blurry, weird pictures.
Yeah, and all your MySpace friends would see it. And
sheep squatch is in my top 8. But it was one of those things. It makes a lot of sense then that the 90s would be kind of the next boon on that, just because you could spread that information / misinformation. I don't know at this point. Like, I want to believe.
I think that there's a lot of people that people want to be trusting and be like, well, why would people lie? Why would people make it up if it didn't happen? And I think that just that's being very naive. I just expect everybody's lying all the time, and then when you work from that position,
it's like, I've had to do that recently. Speaking of the internet, just because, like, getting online, and I'll roll through TikTok because I'll scroll endlessly at the end of the night as I'm drinking my tea. And I'm like looking at that. I'm like, that's not real. That's not real.
Right.
That's not real. That's not real. And as long as I'm believing those things aren't real, I'm like, okay, I feel at least a little bit better about myself.
Like, that's BS. That's BS. Yeah. That's BS. So we'll get into it with Batsquatch, but there's also just a lot of like, if you stop and you think about it, like if you believe in science at all, if you believe in the laws of physics at all, and you stop and think about some of these things, like there's no way it can happen. So you have to believe in like magic and the supernatural in order to believe in a lot of these things, because they are not mathematically or physically possible.
Yeah.
Given what science knows about physics, and like flying people is not possible by their own power. Like you would have to rebuild a human from the ground up, because we do not have the muscles for wings, and your wings would have to be 23 feet wide, and you would then not be able to do anything on the ground because you'd have these giant wings that you're hauling around, and they'd be too heavy. They would just make you fall over.
And we don't have, and on the same note, we don't have the same bone structures.
Right.
Like birds can fly because of hollow bones. Like that's the basis, like the very beginning of it. And then beyond that, obviously, with everything else that they have, like we're not at any point, like even the biggest like mutation, like if you see somebody, Michael Phelps, he's got an elongated torso and he's essentially built to swim like that.
Right.
That's about as far as we get through genetic mutations. People aren't sprouting wings at this point.
Are you calling Phelps a mutant?
Yes, 100%. He may, even at his own point, may call himself a mutant. Like,
he does have that like weird triangle shape to his body. That's what's happening?
I even think something along, they looked at his like feet, and his feet are even like a little more like elongated, a little more flipper-like. He's not like...
He's slightly amphibious.
He's not going to be Frog Boy on the Weekly World News, but there are like biological enhancements essentially that were given to him to give him an advantage when he's going through all of these.
Right. Well, I was reading a thing that a doctor said that you could give a human wings. Like you could take their own skin and build a scaffolding on their back of flaps of skin and have blood vessels and nerves connected to it, and they would be able to feel that, but it would never get them to do anything. It would just be a weird thing attached to their back. So you could give them something that looked like a wing-like structure. I mean, that would be really difficult to do, but that's as far as you would ever be able to go. You would never be able to give a human a wing that could lift them off the ground.
Yeah.
Just because of physics and like it's just mathematically impossible.
But also at the same point, when you're talking about all of these ridiculous cryptids and the explanations, and you have to have, again, like you said, that semblance of, I still want to believe in even though it's impossible.
Right.
And then you start making up the stories, which get you into the conspiracy areas.
Sure.
And maybe like multi-dimensional beings or some sort of aspect along those lines. And you got to kind of create this mythos, or at least glom onto one that would make sense for all of these.
Explain it, yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you my biggest theory for a lot of these things. It's especially in Appalachia, alcohol.
they had some moonshiners out there. They made the old school Mountain Dew.
They're
yes,
kind of famous for moonshining out there. And I think if you get, especially if you're moonshining and you haven't properly cut your heads and your tails, you've got methanol in that, and that can cause hallucinations because it's like toxic. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why distilling was outlawed, because if you don't cut off the first things that come out and the last things that come out, that has all the ethanol in it, or all the methanol in it, which is really toxic. That's why they say like moonshine can make you go blind, but it actually can damage the optic nerve, and then it can cause brain damage, and it can cause you to die. And then also when you ferment things like wood scraps, which became very popular in Prohibition because they were just trying to ferment anything to get alcohol, but wood alcohol can kill you. And so if anybody was throwing in wood scraps to ferment, and then you're drinking that and you're wandering around in the dark and it's, the middle of the woods, and you might have some encounters. Stuff. Also, there might be some interesting mushrooms you're foraging for out there.
True. And I mean, even just looking along those lines and thinking about that, I totally forgot about the distillers that were doing that stuff. They were also, going back to the Scooby-Doo aspect of it, creating and doing things to hide their stills.
Right.
I know for a fact they were wearing special shoes that look like hoof prints. So it looked like tracks of animal tracks as opposed to human tracks. And there was a show on I want to say like Discovery or probably the Learning Channel, which followed some of these bootleggers.
Yeah, there was like a moonshiners.
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
the
moonshiners.
Yeah. And it wasn't legal, I guess. And so they were still doing it, and they were still doing these tracks and like hiding from like the ATF and all of this other stuff because they were still doing this illegally in like the 2010s.
Right.
So it's still alive and well. So as I remember watching that show and being like, oh, okay, this is still going on. So it makes sense to have all of this.
Well, and then think about it too. Like if let's say you're a moonshiner out there in the woods and you're probably moonshining, maybe you have like in that show, they'd have like a shed out in the middle of the woods or even like a hole in the ground that they would build a mound over to moonshine in. So you're already paranoid.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe you're drinking your own product. And maybe you've stayed up all night,
trying to protect
or running it. And so maybe you've got all these things and you're super paranoid. And then maybe somebody's out there just wearing like a big coat. and those weird shoes. And I don't know, and you're drunk or high. I don't know.
It's your buddy making tracks and you forgot he's out there.
Right.
You're
exactly.
like, what the hell is that? It's just me, Jim Bob. Don't worry about it.
Cleve, what are you doing? Yeah, that's what I think. But then, maybe there are some things that we can't explain.
But I mean,
It's a big, crazy world.
And on the same note, though, early Seattle history kind of really does fall in line with that West Virginia aspect. Like, they had the coal mines, but they also had the lumber, and we have the lumber industry,
Right.
and we have more along the lines of like the native mythologies,
Yes.
and all of the different stuff. But it's still spooky out here.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a lot of dark woods out here with unknown things. Now, I will tell you one thing that I do. When I am traveling, like when we went over Mount Rainier recently, and there's just woods and woods and woods and woods, I am always looking through the woods to either see a dead body.
Oh, geez.
Or B, looking for Sasquatch.
All right. That's fair.
So I still do it, even though I don't believe in him.
Yeah.
I still look for him because I want to be a believer. I want to believe, man, like Mulder says. Yeah.
Having met people who really believe, it was hard for me to tell them to their face that, because they're like, do you believe? I'm like, nah. But also, I don't know for sure.
Right.
Like, enough science would say we would have found something
Sure.
in the last 100 years.
A body.
Anything.
Scat.
Like, yeah.
Real hair.
Yeah. But we don't. And so that turns into, like I said, like multidimensional beings, any way
Okay.
that you can kind of
Right.
try to explain it.
Right.
But then also the other thing is too that we have so much wooded area out here, and so many deep woods that who's to say? Like, there's people who have gone out there who have decided just to hang out and live off grid, and they've been able to do it for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But again, eventually they get discovered. So it's always this sort of weird sort of
Right.
aspect. Yeah.
I'm more likely to believe in something that we don't know about in the sea, because we can't explore
Yeah.
the depths of the ocean, and seems like we're constantly finding new species of sea life. Especially the deeper that we're able to explore. So like, I would not be surprised if there was some like leftover dinosaur swimming around somewhere, or some weird, when you get really deep and it's totally dark and you get these really creepy things that have no eyes.
Yeah.
And they look like something out of your nightmare. Like the anglerfish is.
I was about to say anglerfish are like the most terrifying things you could see out there.
That is a monster. Like, we don't need made up monsters. We have real monsters right here. This is okay. And we were talking about movies that defined our childhood and made us terrified of things. I saw Jaws way too early. And then also my dad decided to bring home, I must have only been like 7 or 8, the movie Leviathan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is like, it was complete ripoff of Aliens. It was just underwater aliens.
Yes.
It 100% was underwater alien, and it was total ripoff, but it was terrifying to me. And so for me, like, water I cannot see to the bottom, I am terrified of. I can even be in a hot tub in the dark by myself and can freak myself out. It's my hot tub.
You're the one who filled it.
Right. I know that there's not a monster in there.
It,
But my reptile brain says, maybe something snuck in here when the lid was closed and has been in here. Isn't there an X-Files episode of something in a hot tub? There
Probably.
has to be.
My whole aspect on that just goes back to Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy coming up through the bathtub. Like
100%.
And so that's like, because I watched Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2. Granted, I've learned now in my later years that it was the TV edit, but that doesn't really necessarily make it better. But I literally watched it when I was like 5 years old. So it's one of those where I'm like, nah, the imagery still stuck with me. I don't need to worry about the fact that I didn't get to see Johnny Depp exploding into a fountain of blood. But it was that same aspect of seeing the claw coming up in the bathtub. And that, like, I can't say that the reason why I don't take baths anymore is that, but it was a deciding factor when I was younger.
Sure. And that was me too. Yeah. And then I also grew up on Stephen King novels.
Yes.
Like, I found my mom's collection of Stephen King novels
your mom collected them too?
They were in her closet because my dad didn't like it that she was reading them. And so I would always go root around in her closet to see what was in there. I found some things. She put me in therapy, but
It's another Gen X thing.
Yeah, exactly. The things our parents did.
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay.
But yeah, so I started reading those at a really young age. And some of Stephen King's, especially his early ones, were terrifying.
Yeah.
So that's always stuck with me. And I don't know why it is, though, that I've always been fascinated by scary stuff.
I have.
What is it?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, that's actually a really good kind of like what brought us into like those scary supernatural things. Because I know everyone, like, in their teenage years will have, like, they'll have the goth phase. Everyone has, I swear, everyone has the goth phase.
I 100% had the goth phase.
I never necessarily grew out of it. I was just too fat for the clothes, so that didn't work out for me on that end. But it was all of the, like, I remember going to the library and checking out books on witchcraft, looking up, like, all the strange, mysterious things like spontaneous combustion, like, all of these.
That, like, Unsolved Mysteries book.
Yeah.
I had that. I loved that book. Yeah, the spontaneous combustion part to me was, like
how does that
craziest.
even, yeah.
And they had the pictures of it was just, like, somebody's hand holding a cigarette.
Yeah,
and then
or
their
like a
entire
leg.
body. Yeah,
or just like a leg.
Was,
yeah, it was, like, so, like, and I feel, I mean, I think the unknown is kind of the best. Like, we want to think about that there's more out there. And I don't know about you, but for me, it wasn't an overly religious family. So we didn't have that to kind of lean into. Like, oh, why does this all happen? Oh, it was God. As opposed to now with me when I was younger, it was like, why did this all happen? You're like, oh, because of Sasquatch. Or, you know, because of witchcraft, or because of, like, spooky stuff, like ghosts or the paranormal. These are all the reasons why these are happening, as opposed to an overly religious figure.
So I grew up overly religious.
Okay.
And so I think maybe part of it for me was that was all, anything along that line was deemed as being evil, and you cannot go there. You cannot look at it, talk about it, read about it. That's all evil.
Forbidden, yeah.
And so it was the forbidden thing. And I always have wanted to do what you tell me not to do ever since I was little. So I think that's part of it. And then I think you also, like, when you get scared, you get that rush of adrenaline. And I think it's a little bit of a drug, right? Like, you're like, ooh, I like that feeling, like roller coasters.
Yeah.
You know, you get that huge rush of adrenaline, and it's a little bit of a drug. So I think probably scary stuff that's how, like, why it keeps you coming back.
And I've always had a wild imagination.
Me too.
And so being able to, like, oh, I look out into the darkness in 10 feet and I can't see beyond that. It's anything.
It's Cthulhu.
Yeah. Anything, everything is right in the back on that.
Right.
And it was also another reason why I didn't even, I like camping, but and even now still, like, I like places that have a straight up lighted building for the restroom.
Same.
Because I've done the walk where you go down a half mile or a quarter mile down to the outhouse that is not lit, and your light doesn't go beyond what you're shining in front of your feet, and just hearing nothing and having just the chills and everything just go rush up your spine because you don't know what's happening in the woods 10 feet from you. And I think that's a lot of the fun with it. I mean, fun, but it's terrifying when you're out there by yourself as an adult human. You're thinking, I'm going to die now.
Exactly. Or if you have to go to the bathroom in the woods in the dark, and then you're like, while I'm doing this very vulnerable act and I've got my pants pulled down around my ankles, something's going to get me and drag me away, and I'm going to die with my pants down.
Yeah. Someone's going to find me with my pants down around my ankles with half of my body eaten, and, well, I guess
that's very embarrassing.
Because that's just going to have to be. I'm just going to be Sasquatch food, and God.
Exactly.
So what do you have for us in terms of Sasquatch and Batsquatch?
So our podcast, we constantly talk about Bigfoot, or we always have Bigfoot in our art. I mean, we can even see my water bottle here.
Yep.
And then even our logo is Bigfoot podcaster drinking champagne.
Podcast, I love it.
So, and it's because Bigfoot's kind of it's the Northwest unofficial mascot. Very Northwest. And it's because really the modern Bigfoot phenomena that we know of originated in the Northwest. So we did an episode, it was episode 6, all about an incident that happened in the Northwest in an area called Ape Canyon in 1924. And there was this group of miners that had been up there prospecting. They had a cabin out there in the woods. And one day they see this creature at the spring that they would get their water at, and it freaked them out, and they shot at the creature, which is rude.
Yeah.
First off, and then that night, and
That's
the thing,
not your creek.
yeah, that exactly. Why are you just randomly shooting? What if it was just a hairy miner? Like there's mountain men, right? Like these guys that go out, and maybe it was a nudist and just very hairy.
Hairy nudist.
There's dangers to being nude.
Sasquatch is a hairy nudist.
Well, we always joke that Jody's husband is a Sasquatch, and all he would need to do is take off his clothes and run around in the woods, and somebody would shoot at him. Anyway, so that night they're in their cabin and they're woken up by all this noise outside, and all of a sudden, like, the walls of the cabin are being hit and rocks are being thrown at the cabin, and there's this like screeching happening outside. So they're terrified. Jeez. And they can kind of, because it's an old log cabin with no windows, because it's meant to be, warm during the winter. So no windows, and they wouldn't have, like, glass could have gotten broken. So no windows. It was door and walls and like a chimney. But they could see out through some of the cracks in the logs, and they could see these creatures out there. And so they're terrified, and they stick their gun out and try to like shoot at it. They shoot through the door, and this goes on all night long, where these creatures are shaking the cabin, throwing rocks on the roof, throwing rocks on the wall. These people are terrified, and they're shooting through the doors and thinking that they hit something, but nothing did. And the next morning they look out, and the outside walls, like logs, had been just torn to shreds. There's rocks everywhere. There's debris everywhere. So they load up their wagon and get out of there.
Yeah, peace. I'm not sticking around for that. I don't care. I don't care if it was Bigfoot. I don't care if it was a bear. I don't care if it was a Wendigo, whatever. I'm not sticking around when apparently they're not happy with me being there.
Well, apparently when they left the cabin and they're hauling out of there, they see a creature kind of at the edge of this cliff, and they shoot at it and they hit it, and it falls over the edge. So there should be a dead creature out there, but the body was never found. They go back to town. On the way, they're like, we're not going to tell anybody about this. But one of the members has a big mouth, and he goes in and he gets drunk and he starts telling everybody. So pretty soon word gets around that this happened. So now, of course, people start flocking to this cabin to look for evidence.
Because that's the thing you want to do.
Right.
Like, oh, we feared for our lives. There's a thing that could have potentially, killed us.
Right.
Let's all go now and see what we can see.
Well, and the funny thing, too, is this guy who just kept spilling the beans. Every time he would tell the story, it would get bigger and wilder. And all of a sudden, it's giant boulders that have been thrown around. And, so people go back. Nobody's ever found any evidence of anything out there. But that was the Ape Canyon incident. And that was kind of like the earliest, settlers that have reported it. Now, Sasquatch comes from a Salish word. It's and they have talked about this creature for thousands of years, and it's been kind of sacred in their lore, this creature. And there's Sasquatches and similar types of bipedal humanoids throughout the world in myth. We've got the skunk ape, we've got the Yeti, there's Wendigo, which I just love that word, Wendigo.
I do. I know. I love that word so much. I learned it from comic books and Magic the Gathering, but at the same point, I'm like, that's such a cool name.
Yeah, I think the Magic the Gathering card, isn't it like a skull with horns, the Wendigo on that one?
Oh, I don't remember. I remember there was a green card that was like a Wendigo from Ice Age. That's all I remember. Like, that's it.
Or was it in the Dungeons and Dragons Monsters Handbook, like the old one from the 80s?
Yes.
I know my brother finally sold those because he's like, I'd rather have the $100 than it sitting in my room, and so I don't have them. Yeah, it's the one with the that guy.
Yeah, he's got the basically the antlered skull, which
that's very creepy.
So terrifying, but that same like elongated body, just super tall.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like it's that tall when it sits back on its haunches, and then it stands up and you're like, what?
Yeah. So the whole modern Bigfoot era didn't really start until 1958. And that's when we started calling him Bigfoot. So it was in 1958, these large humanoid footprints were discovered near Bluff Creek in Northern California, which put a pin in Bluff Creek. That'll come back. And so they did some plaster casts of the prints, and that's where the term Bigfoot was originally coined, and we started using it as Bigfoot.
Now, was that plaster cast? Was that the one that was like shown around and shown off to?
So there were a couple. There's been a
Okay.
lot of plaster casts. So there's been a
Yeah.
couple of note, and that was a big one of note. And then we'll get to the other one of note, which
Okay.
is pretty interesting. But the thing that really kind of is in the zeitgeist, in the popular zeitgeist, is the thing that really got the Bigfoot phenomena going. And it really got like Bigfoot hunters rolling. And that was, and I'm sure we're all familiar with this, it's pretty iconic, the 1967 Patterson Gimlin film,
Yes.
also shot in Bluff Creek. And so that's the one where we see this large, hairy humanoid figure just kind of like casually strolling through this like creek bed.
Yeah, just kind of just traipsing along.
Yeah.
I mean, not skipping, but
Yeah, doing kind of like a big arm swing gait,
yeah.
super hairy, turns to look
Turns
at the camera.
and looks at it. Yeah.
And that's kind of that classic Bigfoot silhouette that we get now, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Now, that has been highly debated ever since then.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's a lot of people that have come out and said it's a hoax, and there's a lot of people that want to believe it. And there's also one of the people involved in it said 100% it was a hoax on their deathbed. They said that they were
That's
involved.
what I thought I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in fact, I have that.
And I mean, that even just goes back into what I was talking about, the West Virginia ones, where the Flatwoods Monster has been thoroughly debunked.
Right.
But yet people, I mean, there's still statues in like a weird chair
I saw
in
that weird
Flatwoods.
chair.
Yeah, and it shows
like
it.
alien chair.
That's the alien chair. Like people in the face of the evidence or testimonies will still choose to be like, whatever. I still want to believe.
Right. So in 2004, Bob Hieronymus, I can talk. Bob Hieronymus confessed that he had posed as a Sasquatch in Patterson's 1967 film. And Philip Morris, a North Carolina gorilla suit specialist, claimed to have sold a Sasquatch costume for $435 to an amateur documentary filmmaker named Robert Pattinson. And also, multiple anthropologists and primate experts have weighed in on this film, and the consensus is pretty much like, well, maybe Sasquatch exists, but that's not it.
Like that doesn't have the right gait or anything along
In the
line.
hair pattern.
Yeah.
Like no primates have hairy breasts, and that costume has like breasty
Oh.
things. And I guess that one of them was like, yeah, primates don't have hairy breasts. They usually have like, maybe they'll have thin hair on their breasts, but generally there's not completely covered with hair. So that's one thing. But there's still people who think that is like the best evidence of Bigfoot.
And it, like you said, it is the most iconic like pose, the silhouette. Funnily, strangely enough, though, my wife and her friends this past weekend got Sasquatch tattoos.
I love it.
The wife didn't want to have the silhouette,
Yeah.
so she chose to have the Bigfoot foot on
Okay.
her ankle, and it under it says BFF. So for her, it's fun because it's best friends forever because it was her best friends that they did it with. But also on that same note, it could also just be Bigfoot forever. So
Or big fucking foot.
Yep, big fucking foot. And so it was like both of those sort of little
I love it.
aspects. One of them got the Sasquatch Bigfoot silhouette, but also it's walking a cat on
Oh,
a
that's
leash.
amazing.
So that was her
That's
little
so
twist
good.
on it. And then the other friend got the same design silhouette, but she wanted the Sasquatch smiling. So it has just like a little smiley face on it, just a little upturned grin
That's
on
cute.
it. So yeah, and they even at the same time there was a Sasquatch Fest happening up north that I don't know if they
Oh.
went to, but I know they went to another spot that has like a giant Bigfoot that they got some pictures with.
Oh,
and
that's
just
awesome.
they had a fun little silly weekend, but it also involved around the silhouette
Yeah.
of Sasquatch just because of how it's permeated the Pacific Northwest culture in all aspects.
And I love it. I'm here for it. I love everything. Whenever Jody and I go on a trip together, we always buy Bigfoot stuff. So I'm like, I got Bigfoot ornaments, Bigfoot's on my water bottle, Bigfoot's in our show art. Like we do Bigfoot everywhere. We love it. We love him. Yes, I would love it if he existed. And maybe he existed back like before.
Yeah.
We would have found a body or something at this point. But here's the thing, that one of the other ones when we're talking about the feet. And so this was another big one that perpetuated this myth, but then we'll get into it. So, all right. So in 1969, back to the 60s again. I mean, this is the Patterson-Gimlin film, 1960s.
Yep.
1969. While dumping garbage in Bossburg, Washington, this guy named Joe Rhodes spotted these large footprints at the community dump. And so he reported the discovery. So then Bigfoot hunters swarmed to the town and they were hanging fresh meat on the trees and fruit, trying to lure them.
Smells great.
And they found more footprints. And so there was like over 1,000 footprints found at this incident. Now, here's the thing about the footprints is the right foot was kind of deformed. So it was slightly smaller. It had 2 lumps on the outer edge and a third toe that was either badly twisted or missing. And then, so this is like, everybody's going crazy with this, right? They have plaster casts of that. And that might be some of the feet that you see. Those were pretty famous. And then also this other searcher, Joe Metlow, claimed that he actually had possession of a Sasquatch and he had a video of it. And so he's showing the video around. People are trying to verify it. And there's kind of like this Mary Chase going around looking for the Sasquatch. And finally they're like, okay, this guy is lying. So then they go back to the footprints. There's this British anthropologist, Dr. John Napier. He's the former curator of primates at the Smithsonian. So he examined these casts and photographs. And he was like, well, that is a clubfoot deformity from childhood. And here's what he said. It is difficult to conceive of a hoaxer so subtle, so knowledgeable, and so sick that would deliberately fake a footprint of this nature.
And I mean, absolutely. Like, most people aren't going to go that in depth, you would think,
right,
on a hoax.
So he went on to say either some of the footprints are real or all are fakes. If they are all fakes, then an explanation invoking legend and folk memory is adequate to explain the mystery. But if any of them is real, then as scientists, we have a lot to explain. Among other things, we will have to rewrite the story of human evolution. He also went on to say that somebody who could fake these would have to be smarter than him. And as far as he knew, I'm paraphrasing, but as far as he knew, there was nobody who was in the world who was cleverer than him. Like, he was so enamored of his own intelligence.
His ego was so big on that. No one could be smart enough to do this, basically, to trick me into thinking this is real. It has to be real. And they were like, gotcha.
Upon his death in 2002, the family of Ray L. Wallace admitted that he had made the giant footprints in 1958 and faked it. And then somebody else came forward and said that they had faked all those footprints in 1969.
Gotcha.
So just said it was a hoax. Straight up hoax. And there's been no definitive evidence of Bigfoot ever found. Like, people have found hair that they can't definitively say is human or figure out what kind of animal it's from. So unidentified does not mean the existence of Bigfoot. We've never found a body.
Yeah.
We've never found feces. Never found any bone remains. There has to be a proof of it
there
out there.
There haven't been, like, I don't want to call Warrens was the first word that came to mind, but like a den or anything like that. Like, I feel like somebody would have stumbled upon something just in a cave, like something that wasn't a bear, you know, like any sort of aspect of it.
Fuzzy photographs and weird footprints are not proof.
Yeah.
So that's my whole thing. And like I said, maybe it existed before. But at this point, like, there's so many humans everywhere, even though there's still a lot of woods out in the United States, we would have found a body. And people will say, oh, well, it's because the Bigfoots will always go and claim they're dead, so they never leave a corpse. But I'm like, that's not always going to happen if, you know, Bigfoot Jr.'s out wandering around in the woods and falls down a cliff. That doesn't mean that, like, his mom and dad can come get them or whatever, like somebody would find that somewhere.
What was that, Lassie? Bigfoot Jr. stuck in a well again? Better go get him. That's the first thing that came to mind. It's just the ability to kind of ignore that aspect of it is just, I mean, it's that human nature. And just, I agree in the aspects of there have been sightings or writings or whatever you want to say about it for thousands of years around here.
Right.
And it's in the worldwide, like, conscious. Like, everybody from somewhere has a different version of a giant, hairy creature living out wherever they are. So it stands to reason. I feel like it's just one of those unknown human sort of, we need to have something tangible to explain our fear of the dark.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now, maybe tens of thousands of years ago, we did have a giant primate in North America that was not a human. Possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be possible. Maybe that's where a lot of these First Nations legends come from.
Yeah.
Because maybe there was a giant primate that was, a branch off from another hominoid that then died out. Sure, that seems reasonable. But today, I doubt it.
Yeah.
And then that's going to bring us to another Pacific Northwest legend.
Na 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 na
Batsquatch.
Which I'm sorry, can't help it. Got to do it. I think the first time I ever heard of Batsquatch was from you when we talked about it on GCP. You mentioned, I'm like, no, what is this? No. And then I saw the pictures and then I was like, yeah, that's nightmare fuel.
Yeah. Well, mostly I know of it because of the beer by Rogue. It's called Batsquatch. I was like, what is this thing? And then I was like, well, this is just a silly thing that Rogue came up with. And I was like, no, this is something that somebody believes in. In the 1990s, in the mid-90s, some teenager is driving in the dark home and his car breaks down. And while he's trying to figure out what's happening to his car, he sees this 8-foot tall creature with the bat of a head and wings, but it's like a Sasquatch with wings, but it also has blue fur.
Blue fur now.
Yeah, and I think this was down near Mount St. Helens.
Okay.
And so all of the subsequent reportings have been from around Mount St. Helens. So the theory is that when Mount St. Helens erupted in the 80s, is that it opened up a cave or something where Batsquatch lives, and now there are sightings. Now, do we need blue fur?
Blue fur.
Wings.
Sasquatch.
Like a bat face.
Bat face, bat ears.
Yeah.
Can fly.
Oh, of course. Sure, why not?
Let's see prior conversation in this podcast about humanoids flying.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is some kid who was probably stoned out of his mind on his way home. Maybe he was on his way home from a rave. It was the 90s.
True.
I mean, you get to talk about raver culture in your previous one, and I know maybe not from personal experience about, LSD and raves.
I
will neither confirm nor deny.
I'll be honest. I have never seen a giant blue furred flying thing under any sort of substance. No, nothing. No. I mean, I've seen some interesting things, but most of the time it's been vibes. But
right.
But also, it's the 90s. I'm trying to remember when there was that one movie that had the flying. I can't even remember the name of the movie right now. It was a horror movie. I just remember the teenagers being on a school bus being chased by basically the scarecrow flying monstrosity. But it seems kind of along those same lines of that.
Yeah.
Like, you maybe watched a movie, maybe you had that influence in your brain. Again, it was the 90s. You could have saw an episode of X-Files. A lot of stuff in the 90s was extreme.
Yes.
And so to see those go into kind of that next upgrade for Sasquatch being, yeah, he's got wings and blue fur and he looks
Sure.
like a bat and he's
Sure.
also terrifying.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Maybe it was also just this angsty kid's like creative writing project that he presented as real.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
at that point you're like, oh, I can't, like, did you
can't
really
back up
see
now.
that? Yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm gonna say I
Yep,
did. And
exactly. Well, and so apparently there was this I guess the Fox News network had like a monsters and myths sort of thing. Yeah. Anyway, so they sent one of the hosts to talk to this guy, and he wouldn't talk to this news host. I don't want to call him a reporter.
yeah, fair enough.
This person. And so he was like, you got to talk to my mom. And his mom's like, he doesn't like to talk about it.
It was very
It was
dramatic.
very dramatic.
He's suffering from burnout now, and well,
He got kicked off of MySpace for this. And I don't know. Just got to keep bringing up MySpace. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of Batsquatch. And it's kind of one of those legends that's like super PNW and super quirky. So, of course, like we want to perpetuate it because it's kind of fun and makes us more interesting. Because, I mean, yeah.
Well, and even just looking back and going back to the Flatwoods Monster being the alien that was based off of the actual meteor that was going that had been
Right.
seen across the thing, having it based on a naturally occurring event and then the repercussions of that also falls in line with just any sort of creative writing that we've seen. Like the Night of the Living Dead was based off of a meteor. Having something like this, this giant volcano erupting, opening up this long forgotten or blocked off pathway to a cave system that held Batsquatch or
Right.
whatever cryptid you want to put out there. It is at least in the lines of, I don't want to even say plausible, but it's, again, leading into that creative writing
Right.
sort of aspect of like, we don't know what is going on when something like this happens. This long dormant volcano suddenly goes off for whatever reason and now is unlocking monstrosities to unleash to the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you can look at it in a bunch of different ways. You can look at it biblically. You can look at it just cryptidly.
Mm-hmm.
But in all the same points, it's that same sort of aspect where something happens. We can't explain what happens because we just don't have the capacity to know. And so we will fill it in with all of our own stories.
Sure.
It's the same reason why, when seasons change or there was drought or there was famine or there was, excessive flooding, there would be a reason and the elders would tell them it was because this happened or because of this
Right.
happened, because it's human nature to want to know.
Right.
And they'll fill in the blanks however which way they want. And then you'll get in the grifters, the people who make up their own footprints and their own costumes, however which way, because they want to be a part of that story.
Now, I have thought about putting on a Sasquatch costume and just walking through the woods just barely out of the tree line or inside the tree line along the 410 freeway, but I was like, someone's going to shoot me.
Yeah. No. Like the interesting thing about the Pacific Northwest, if you don't know, it gets real rural real fast. And a lot of people have their hunting licenses.
Well, I've even thought it would be fun to get like a really wispy white gown and just like make my hair really flat and kind of creepy looking and just like walk, like find a hiking trail and then just walk like slightly in the tree line off that and just kind of do that just to freak people out. But I don't have that kind of time.
Right. You don't have that kind of time and it's a lot of work. And then nowadays repercussions may be maybe not what you expected and maybe a little bit more than what you were expecting.
Well, also, I'm like thinking about this wispy white gown. It's going to get caught on the blackberry vines and it's not going to be as like ethereal looking.
You're like, ooh, oh, damn it, caught again. I
know. Or it's going to be raining and then it's wet and it's just going to be stuck to you.
It will always be raining.
And we know how I feel about being wet and cold outside.
I love it though because it's still all of the cryptids. It pervades through all of our pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones I've talked about came from Fallout, and pop culture has reached through. There have been Sasquatch movies.
Mm-hmm.
Sasquatch has been in video games.
There's Sasquatch erotica.
Of course there is. Is it just Chuck Tingle or is there more than just that?
We did a whole episode on Bigfoot erotica, but it was so filth we could not release it in our normal feed. So it is in our Patreon. It's bad. It's real dirty.
That's amazing. Okay. If you haven't subscribed to the Patreon, how can people find it?
If you go to our website, rainydayrabbitholes.com, we've got it in multiple areas, and for just $5 a month, you get all the
Bigfoot erotica you can want.
Erotica you don't want. I don't know. Maybe you don't want to listen to that episode.
Well, I mean, you never know. You could just have like, I feel that could almost be like kind of a Cliff Notes book club sort of aspect of it. They'll go through all of the Bigfoot erotica, so you don't have to.
Oh yeah, you don't want to. No, unfortunately, the one that I feel bad I forced Jody to do the one who read the erotica. And it started off innocently enough. There was this self-published book on Amazon called Satisfying Sasquatch.
Sure.
And it was 16 pages long.
That's not that long. That gets right to it.
And that one was just very dumb.
Okay.
And simple. And then she's like, well, no, I gotta find one. And so she found the most highly rated one on Amazon that wasn't like 42 hours.
Okay.
And it was like maybe coded child pornography almost.
Oh no.
So we were like, oh, this got real uncomfortable.
This got real creepy real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like,
you got to watch out for the self-published stuff I found on Amazon, because anyone can publish on Amazon. Yeah. Like once you figure it out. And then also like the free ebooks on Audible. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, you'll just run into a landmine and you're like, I did not know. And then it's voiced usually by AI.
Oh, I hate
which
AI voice
makes
stuff.
It really, really weird. Just in general.
No, don't like it.
Yeah. So
I'd rather hear Stephen King reading one of his own books, and I don't like that.
I think anything's better than the AI. When I'm just like, listen, I'm like, those weren't the words. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the right word, or the pronunciations are just like slightly weird. You're like, all right.
You're getting that uncanny valley just from the voice.
But I mean, if you need your Sasquatch porn,
I mean, yeah,
it's out there.
It's out there. There's also one that is, I think, encompasses Bigfoot, aliens, and dinosaurs all in one erotica novel. I am not going to do that because I do not need.
That's just
dirty.
That's just like mixing. Yeah, aliens, Jurassic Park, and all right.
What are you doing to the dinosaurs?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't want to know.
No,
I'm sorry.
Don't ever.
Not to kink shame, but
But we're doing it.
Get on board with bestiality. Which kind of is Bigfoot too. When you think about
at that same point, yeah. Like, what do you call it at that point?
Well, if you imagine it as just a very hairy man, then you're coding bear. But
there you go.
Otherwise, yeah, it's kind of bestiality. I don't know.
Well,
I'd be like, I don't know. Maybe the ones where they have sex with cars is a little bit less disturbing.
Well, I mean, there's probably a car cryptid out there now as well, too.
Oh,
yeah. Well, beside Christine, again, going back to Stephen King. Shea, I really appreciate you coming on. RainyDayRabbitHoles.com is where people can find
everything.
Follow them on the socials. If you need that Squatch erotica, hit up the Patreon. Well, there's plenty of other things too as well.
Yes, the Patreon, we have bonus episodes, and you also get all your episodes ad-free and a day early.
That's
and
amazing.
Then plus, so we have a couple tiers. The $5 tiers, you get all the bonus and the ad-free episodes, and then we'll start sending stickers to those $10 patrons. And in fact, if you sign up before the end of November, we'll send you a Rainy Day Rabbit Holes Christmas tree ornament. Ooh. And then if you sign up for the $20 one, you get all of those. And also we will allow you to tell us what to do an episode about. And we'll send you a Rainy Day Rabbit Holes wine glass.
Nice.
Or mug, depending on what you want. Yeah.
Getting all the swag for peeps.
Yeah, exactly.
That is awesome. So again, check it out, RainyDayRabbitHoles.com.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
This was fantastic.
Sorry, I hope I didn't ruin Okay, so this is the trope for our podcast is Jody always accuses me of ruining everything, and I kind of do. So I know I ruined cryptids for somebody out there. I apologize. If you believe and you want to keep believing, knock yourselves out. Like,
absolutely.
Make yourselves happy. And then if you have some proof for me, show it to me. Because like I said, I do want to believe. I don't want to ruin everything you love. I'm so sorry.
So yeah, just contact Shea. Shea with your own pictures of Sasquatch or Batsquatch, whichever one you found.
Not erotic ones, though.
No. Let's keep them above the waistline, I believe. I think above the waistline would be the best way for that one.
I don't need Bigfoot dick pics.